Hey guys, the Super Marin Bros are back again with a new video. Today we would like to discuss the new Cryo support around the block, Shenhe. We'll help clear up your questions regarding Shenhe, especially her role in the current meta, as well as potential Shenhe alternatives you may already have. Shenhe is the latest Cryo 5-star introduced in version 2.4. At C0, Shenhe is a good support to her Cryo teammates, capable of providing a 15% Cryo damage bonus, a 15% buff to elemental skill and burst, or a 15% buff to normal charge and plunge attack damage, and finally, a damage buff through her icy quills, which buffs normal, charge, plunge, skill, and burst damage based on 82.18% of Shenhe's attack at talent level 10, similar to the Cinnabar Spindle and Crescent Pike. Shenhe's skill actually gives each of her Cryo teammates 5 if she taps E, or 7 if she holds E, icy quill stacks. Additionally, she reduces enemy resistances to Cryo and Physical by 15%. Shenhe can also provide a 20% attack buff from the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige set or a full attack build to maximize her damage buff, a 15% crit rate increase from Cryo Resonance, and finally, Shenhe can be a Cryo battery that can utilize the Favonius Lance. However, there are certain pre-existing Cryo characters that are already good supports, such as Kaeya, Diona, Rosaria, and also Ganyu. Let's examine how a C0 Shenhe compares to them, shall we? Shenhe vs Kaeya. As a Cryo support, Shenhe provides more than Kaeya. Firstly, Kaeya doesn't possess the innate ability to buff his allies outside of Cryo Resonance. He does deal a substantial amount of damage, especially with constellations. Kaeya is normally used in Reverse Melt, Hu Tao Vape Melt teams, and Freeze teams. Shenhe is usually the superior option in Freeze teams, but Kaeya may be better than Shenhe in Reverse Melt and Hu Tao teams. Shenhe vs Diona. Diona has been a staple in Ayaka and Ganyu comps. She provides a shield and healing to help sustain Ganyu or Ayaka, energy funneling with Favonius Bow or Sacrificial Bow, and finally, a 20% attack buff from Noblesse Oblige. Shenhe is different in that she provides various damage bonuses to her Cryo teammates. There's the argument that Freeze teams don't actually need a healer when played right, and you usually won't need a shield if you clear content fast enough either. However, this does not diminish Diona's value as a battery. Additionally, Diona doesn't provide damage herself as she is built with HP in mind. Shenhe's damage is still a big improvement from Diona's non-existent damage. We consider Shenhe to be a potential alternative to Diona in Ganyu Freeze comps. However, Sackbow Diona is an excellent battery for Ayaka and is harder to replace. Diona is also a formidable support in the Melt Ganyu comp at C6. Her shield can be very useful in Melt teams as Ganyu can't always afford to dodge and incur DPS loss. Shenhe and Diona can also be used with Eula, but Diona's role in Eula teams is invaluable, as Eula requires a good battery to be used effectively. Overall, Shenhe and Diona serve different roles, so they aren't really comparable. Shenhe vs Rosaria. Now this is where things get a little interesting. We argue that Shenhe in a Freeze team is strictly better than Rosaria, assuming Shenhe's ER requirements are met. In Eula comps, Shenhe may not do as much damage as Rosaria, but she provides comparable buffs to C6 Rosaria. Rosaria can provide more crit rate with her A4 passive, which can be very useful. On the other hand, Shenhe can provide Eula with a 15% buff to Eula's normal attacks or a 15% buff to Eula's elemental skill or burst. She also debuffs enemies with her 15% physical and 15% cryo shred. The problem is that Eula doesn't need more shred due to her skill and superconduct providing more than enough shred. On the other hand, Constellation 6 Rosaria is a very good competitor to Shenhe in this comp, as she can reduce enemy physical resistances by 20%. She also has a passive that increases allies' crit rate by 15% of her own crit rate, which can provide 15% crit rate to her allies at 100% crit rate. Additionally, she can also funnel energy to Eula using the Favonius Lance. Shenhe can give more buffs to Eula than Rosaria does, but Rosaria's crit rate buff, personal damage, and much lower ER requirements may be more beneficial in the long run. Obviously, Shenhe is a good support, but you should definitely consider Rosaria if you already have her at C6. However, if you do not have a C6 Rosaria, then Shenhe would be a viable option for you. That being said, Eula has better teams that utilize neither of them, such as Eula, Beidou, Fischl, and Diona. Finally, we'll be comparing two of the Cloud Retainer students, Shenhe and Ganyu. You might be wondering why we are categorizing Ganyu as a support. Isn't she a main DPS? Well, given that we have another strong option today in Ayaka, players are given the choice to either on-field with Ayaka or Ganyu. If you happen to be an Ayaka main like myself, then you would probably consider using Ganyu as a support/sub-DPS. So what does Ganyu provide? Well, to put it simply, she gives a 20% cryo damage bonus to Ayaka and a 15% crit rate increase from cryo resonance. That's it. It's not recommended to use the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige set as Ganyu is unable to snapshot the 20% attack buff. On paper, Ganyu's looking pretty mediocre as a support compared to Shenhe, right? Well, yes, you're absolutely right there. Shenhe will definitely provide much more damage to your Ayaka than Ganyu will. However, Ganyu does way more damage than Shenhe. Ganyu's burst is usually overlooked, even though it has good scalings, a very wide coverage range, limited quadratic scaling when enemies are close together, and unlimited uptime on her burst. If you don't know what quadratic scaling is, it basically means each of Ganyu's burst hits will deal more damage the more enemies there are. This means that Ganyu's burst would do 4 times more damage if it hits 2 enemies that are in the hitbox of Ganyu's burst in AoE. Unlike Child's Riptide, Ganyu's burst has limited quadratic scaling. This means that if there are more than 5 enemies, Ganyu's burst scaling will be linear thereafter. Even when Ganyu is not the on-fielder, she's an incredible sub-DPS, as explained above. Shenhe doesn't come close to her damage, but she provides more buffs than Ganyu does. Obviously, Shenhe is easier to build than Ganyu. She doesn't need to do crazy damage herself, as she is there to support Ayaka. Ganyu, on the other hand, would need high investment to justify using her over Shenhe. If you already have a Ganyu fully built and she's being used as a support for your Ayaka, do you really need that shiny new toy in Shenhe? There's no doubt that Shenhe is a strong support, but in our opinion, she isn't a necessity if you already have Ganyu. If you want to maximize Ayaka's damage and don't have Ganyu, then Shenhe isn't a bad pull. We won't be covering other cryo characters such as Chongyun, Chi-Chi, and Aloy. Chongyun is mainly used as a sub-DPS quick swapper, and is used in National Team and other teams. He isn't as common in Freeze teams since what he provides to characters like Ayaka and Ganyu aren't as valuable as what he would provide to perhaps Rosaria or Kaeya. That being said, Rosaria or Kaeya aren't normally used in Freeze comps. Chi-Chi, on the other hand, is kind of a niche support in Eula teams. However, her role there isn't only as a support, but also a sub-DPS. Finally, Aloy is, well, underwhelming, and she doesn't actually do much for anyone in the current meta. We would actually argue that Aloy might be the worst character in Genshin Impact. As for Shenhe's constellations, C1 to C6 are all relevant, except for her C5. She certainly improves a lot with constellations, as her support capabilities and damage are magnified further. Shenhe is still new, and there's a lot we don't know, like her viability in melt comps and whether her triple cryo comp, which gets more icy cool stacks, is better than freeze. But the one thing we do know is that Shenhe is a decent cryo support and fits quite well in the current metagame. I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis of Shenhe. We wanted to primarily focus on her compared to other cryo supports to show people that even though she is amazing, she isn't a must-have for everyone. We, like everyone, prioritize team damage, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't consider resources. Not everyone is sponsored by several bank accounts like some whales are, and not everyone is lucky enough to have every single 5-star in the game. We hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video.